Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, and welcome to Learning from Karbala, our Muharram special. My name is NASRIN KAZMI, and on last week's show we were talking about some of the lessons that we derive from the day of Ashura and the events of Karbala. Today we're going to be continuing that series and talking about the various different aspects that we can take from the lessons that we learn. Because of course Karbala is one that's, the lessons are multi-layered, and so it's very difficult for us to just incorporate everything into a few shows, but we're going to attempt to do that, as well as answering some of the frequently asked questions that we get from people from other schools of thought as well. So joining me this evening as ever is Sister Ayman Hirji. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
We started this series last week by talking about some of the lessons that we learn from the events that unfolded on the day of Ashura. One of the most important things that we talked about was how Imam Hussein al-Islam did this for no other reason but to gain proximity to Allah. And that was his intention. His intention was to reform the religion of his grandfather. There was no worldly benefits or any gains that he derived from it, other than he sacrificed himself to keep the torch or the candle of Islam burning for the rest of us, so that we can practice it today. Alhamdulillah. But unfortunately he has received criticism from contemporary as well as scholars of old. For example, Ibn Taymiyyah, who's very sort of famously criticized this stance of Imam Hussein al-Islam, saying that it was for political reasons. So how would you respond to this sort of criticism?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I think we mentioned a bit of this, but then obviously you mentioned quite rightly that when Imam Hussein was leaving Medina, we see that there were people around him at that point who did not want to go with him and who questioned his decision to leave Medina. And he responded to this query to his half-brother, Muhammad ibn Hanafiyyah. And he said to him that he wrote a letter to him. He wrote in a letter stating that he is not rising for want of power or position or for any form of greed, except to, like you mentioned, the key word there, reform the nation, the ummah of his father and of his grandfather and his father. And if you remember that for him, for an imam at that time to say that that he has to take this stance because of the state of the ummah, it indicates first of all that he is absolving himself of any personal gains at that point. He is not running away from anything. He has stood up to say that this is what my intention is, and that I will do whatever it takes to reform this ummah. I will take whatever measures I need to change the way things are going, because it is in a state that is in total decline. There is like there's total obliviousness to Islam altogether. This isn't the religion of Allah. This isn't the religion that Rasulullah brought, and that my father, Imam Ali alayhi salam, the leader of the believers, upheld, and that his brother upheld after Imam Ali. And for him to respond in that and saying that, but I will do this, he continues to say. And how am I aiming to do this? I'm not aiming to do this by going to war with anyone. I'm not aiming to do this by snatching the power from anyone, pulling the throne from under anyone. I'm not trying to do this by buying anybody out, by convincing them that, you know, by forcing them to believe that if they don't come to me, then they will face hellfire. I have not said any of that. Rather, I will attempt to do this by two ways. One is Amr bin Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar. The second is Nahy anil Munkar. And Amr bin Ma'ruf is one of the principles of Deen that we follow, that are obligatory on us, which state that you enjoin the good, you enjoin that which is acknowledged and known to be true, and you constantly admonish and advise and counsel those who have forgotten.
So would you say,
are negligent?
Is it fair to say that the ummah at the time had forgotten what was good?
The
had
ummah
it deteriorated
had become
to that
very
state?
busy, like we said, in the world and its occupations, and it had reached. I'll be honest with you, why I say it had become such a state. It had become a state that was that felt like there was no that needed a real change, that needed reminders, that needed, like every time and age. But this state was something that had the Imam had thought it through. It wasn't something that, oh, he just upped and moved. He had considered every option, and this was the option left to him. And he chose to move from Medina. He was by his grandfather there. He was by his mother there. Okay? He was by his brother there. He had his whole family there living comfortably. There was nothing more painful for him than to leave his mother's side, than to leave his grandfather's side, and to leave the place that Rasulullah had called home and made the center of the Muslim Ummah. And to leave there from, you know, all the significant things that happened in Medina, the first masjid there, the battles that were fought there, the revelation of the Quran that occurred there, the events that happened in the Prophet's life, the event of Ghadir, the event of Mubahila, everything that happened over there, the event of the brotherhood between Rasulullah. There was a lot of history in that place, there was a lot of attachment as well, but there's no greater attachment than Allah. That was one significance. And when I do this because this is the stance I need to take to revive and remind people of Allah. And the reminder comes through reminder of the truth and the good. Again, Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar was an indication to what? And to remind them to stay away and admonish them from the evil was why the good and evil again came in correlation to who? For your personal gain, for your social gain, and for closeness to Allah, which we know was through Rasulullah, through the Quran and his Ahlul Bayt. And if he's the fifth of the Ahlul Kisa and he's standing up and he's telling you, I'm the only surviving member of the 5 who were under the cloak, and I'm the one who Rasulullah said, Hussein is from me and I am from Hussein. I'm the one who, grew up in the lap of Zahra. I'm the one who Imam Ali stroked. I'm the one who Rasulullah kissed and called his own son. And if I am speaking something that is wrong, then correct me.
So it's essentially waking the conscience of the people who had
they were graced with infallibility. We know that, and we acknowledge that in the school of the Ahlul Bayt. But you see, as a leader, he never said, I will take it up because it's mine. I will take it from you. Rightfully it was theirs, but in the Muslim Ummah, rightfully it was their haqq. But they never usurped in it in any way. They never forcefully took it. Yet he stands up and he answers the queries of the people, and he leaves Medina. He's not looking for any kind of trouble with anyone.
What's also interesting to mention as well is that each and every one of the Imams alayhi salam did what they had to do, bearing in mind the circumstances at the time. So if we look at Imam Hassan alayhi salam, when he made this treaty with Muawiyah, which of course Muawiyah went on to break every single one of those conditions. But again, this is a demonstration to the people of the kind of person that Muawiyah was, of the intelligent, discerning person amongst the Ummah. They would be able to see this. So each act that they performed, everything that they said and did was to show the people in their different ways and to appeal to their hearts,
and if he wanted, he could have said to Muhammad ibn Hanafiya, even at that point, I'm your Imam. Whatever I say goes. Why do you question my decision? You don't see a response like this. You see him answering his queries. Whoever said, I don't want to accompany you, he said, but I am standing up for the truth. I am not going to change my decision. They tried to convince him, persuade him not to go. So it wasn't something that Ibn Taymiyyah comes after so many years and decides. And if you look, Ibn Taymiyyah decides to accuse him of such a thing, when he knows that at the end, what did Imam gain anyway? When he moved to Karbala and when he bought the land there, he said what to the people there? To bury our bodies after we are decapitated. This is all history he's read himself. Probably he's read this. And then you see contemporaries speaking of Imam Hussein with such high regard.
We look at what Charles Dickens said, and even he understood. He said that if Imam Hussein had anything to gain that was worldly, I don't see why he took his women and his children.
Exactly.
Even he could say, and of course we know that Rasulullah also knew of this event. When Imam Hussein was born, Jibreel came and told him about this event. So how could it be that this would be his motivation, Imam Hussein's motivation, when Rasulullah himself wept for this very event, and he knew the reasons why. Rasulullah wept so much because he knew the state of his ummah, and that what Imam Hussein would have to do to reform it later. So the answers are all there as well in history.
Yes, definitely. And Imam Hussein to the end, we're talking about Imam Hussein, and excuse my saying so, but we're not talking of him exclusively for the Shias.
Of course not.
It's very important to highlight that when we talk about Imam Hussein, whether we talk about Rasulullah, we talk about Imam Ali, Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein, especially when we talk about Imam Hussein, I say especially because there is a misconception amongst the general Muslim Ummah that Hussein is only for the Shias. But this is untrue, because if you consider Rasulullah as your prophet and you consider him as the grandson of Rasulullah, and that he is tortured and martyred, and his body is trampled, and his brother's arms are severed in the manner that they are. And this is what Edward Gibbon says, that that even it moves the coldest of readers, right? So if you, as the Ummah of Rasulullah, read or witness such a tragedy, or even start to imagine what it was like, would it not move you? We're not talking of somebody very far away from Rasulullah. This is the one who Lady Zahra says, "You're the apple of my eyes." This is the same person that Rasulullah used to play with, make him sit on his lap, kiss him, hold him, teach him, brought him up. And if nothing else moves you, at least the tragedy should move you to tears and make you question why he went, what was he doing there? How did he come to such a situation that the Muslims themselves at that point were refusing to acknowledge him to be a man of great honor, and that he was the best of the men at that time. And that is what is the striking contrast on the day of Ashura, is that there was a striking contrast between the two parties, that their morals, ethics were a complete contrast. There was people on the other side who were totally oblivious to humanity. And that is why we say Imam Hussein is not only for the Shias. He is no. We love him, and we want everyone to love him and to understand him, because we see that today in our time and age. We see how the Muslims are alienating themselves from the family of Rasulullah, and it's the same situation. We're not far away from the same situation. They alienate. Maybe I'm not calling you the opposition. I'm saying we are alienating ourselves from those people. Rasulullah said, "These are my family. These are the people I love. Oh Allah, love those who love them." If they hurt them, then they hurt me. If they anger them, then they anger me. These are the people. These are the words of Rasulullah. They're not my words. So even in this time and age, you still see Muslims amongst us who are, even scholars who are perpetrating this message that the followers of the Ahlul Bayt are wrong, and they're doing haram, and they're doing by their intense love for Hussein. You look into your own hearts and think, is loving Hussein wrong? Is weeping over his tragedy wrong? Is questioning why Muslim Ummah had got into such a state wrong? You think about it for yourself, and you try and understand the situation. And even on the plains of Karbala, Imam Hussein turns around to the opposition and says, even if you don't want to believe in God, don't. But think like free men. What does that mean? A free human being is free in knowing that the only attachment he has is to Allah. And the only responsibility and accountability he has is to Allah. And so if he were to do anything, his awareness and his consciousness would be based on that. So when Imam Hussein on that plain stood and spoke, when he gave up his 6-month-old baby, who do you think he did it for? He didn't do it for himself. He was not showing off to anyone. There was no one to show off to. There was no one on the other side who was listening anyway. This was for the Ummah that was coming to see that even if his blood was to be spilled, it's a small price to pay for loving Allah. It's a small price to pay to stand up for the truth. And we see just injustice everywhere. And Imam Hussein's greatest message, especially with the political situations all across the globe, is that injustice should not be tolerated. Injustice should not be tolerated, whether that's at the level of domestic abuse, child abuse, assaulting children at a young age. So just because they're exclusive, for example, charities around this our country who deal with these things, doesn't mean we don't support them, doesn't mean we don't have a voice for them. We must acknowledge that Hussein is for humanity. That's what he stands for. And that if you make your mind up that this is for Allah, then Allah will help you through it. And that it is our moral responsibility and our personal and political responsibility to stand up for those who don't have a voice, who cannot stand up for themselves, and to be a part of all these things.
It's a very important point, because this is again how we can apply this and how it's relevant to our lives today, because we look at every single situation that's going on around the world, whether it's oppression of Muslims in Bahrain or Pakistan or Afghanistan or wherever it is, and we see that we have responsibility as well to stand up against oppression. And like you said, whether it's within the home or whether it's socially, globally, whatever it is, the thing about Muharram and this time of year is it really revives and empowers us, and it instills a sort of Husseini spirit, and we realise what he stood for and what we should stand for. In the same way that every Shahr Ramadan we feel that much closer to Allah and we want to be the best of people, and socially, I mean, the way that we break fast together, it brings the Ummah together. And similarly, this month of Muharram, this commemorating every single year, this is some of the things that we learn from it, and that empowers us within ourselves, and then to outwardly sort of outpour into the world as well.
If you just think about, even for a second, if you think about what the values are that we come together for, it changes, it shifts the whole paradigm for every Muslim. Because if you come into the masjid, whatever madhab you follow, whatever school of thought you follow, and you know what Imam Hussein stood for, and you come with that intention, that I come here because I commemorate the man who stood for the truth, I commemorate the man who had the best of values, and he stood firm to these values, because he did not want any personal gain, but he wanted to awaken the Ummah, and he wanted to remind them that this isn't the truth, and look at the extent that they are willing to go to. For what? For bay'ah? For me to accept the leadership? They said that before the battle started, before even we got to Karbala, when I think Shimr or Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, one of the leaders where Umar Assad was being spoken to, they said, what kind of battle are you anticipating? And he said, a battle in which heads and arms will fly. So they had already intended that they were not going to spare any avenues to torture and to butcher these individuals, whoever they were.
And even a 6-month child, I mean, we see from that these people that claim to be Muslim didn't have a shred of humanity within them.
And they prayed their salah on that morning.
And how could it be that they were doing it for reasons of Islam or the correct reasons, when they couldn't even spare a little child? It wasn't as though they were fighting against an armed man. So this shows, it demonstrates once again what was truly their agenda, what was truly going on in their hearts.
Yeah, and the discussion between Imam Hussein and Umar Assad, we know on the night, is that he says to him, what will you gain from killing me? And he says, well, I've been promised Ray, the province of Ray. And he says, Umar Assad, you will not even eat of the barley of Ray. And he laughs it off and he walks off. He says, I know who you are and I know what your position is, but for me Ray is greater. I have an more intense passion for that than to. So the focus of their attention, and this is what happens in our lives. And I'm not equating us to them. I am saying, on a personal level, we need to see where we stand. When you look at one of the greatest companions, Hur ibn Yazid al-Riyahi, on the eve of Ashura, when he stands between the two camps, I feel personally that's where I stand. Every time I think about Ashura, I feel I stand there, because I think, where am I leading myself? Where is my soul leading me?
This is again one of the greatest lessons that we learn from Karbala, is about forgiveness as well.
Yeah, and having the choice to choose the path to truth or falsehood. Yeah, and to awaken your spirit. And that's what Imam Hussein's words did. The reminder that he was constantly issuing. This is what it did. His actions propelled that. That we know that before, when Hur stopped him, Hur prayed salah behind him. Imam Hussein made sure all of Hur's horses and men had water to drink before they drank. And this is the same man who, on the plains of Karbala, has been denied water to his family, to his children, and to himself. And Hur realizes and comes towards him. And like you said, the greatest of lessons is that of forgiveness. That Imam says to him, well, when you've understood the truth and the recognition has come in your soul and the heart, then Allah has opened your heart to the truth, and He has softened it to receive this light, to receive His light and His guidance, and Allah has forgiven you. And Imam in that moment even says, I apologize that today you are my guest and I cannot even offer you anything.
SubhanAllah.
And Lady Zainab gives her salams to him. And in the end, Hur goes to the battlefield first, requests permission to be the first to go into the battlefield. And when he is martyred, he has a wound that's a big gash on his forehead. What does Imam Hussein do? He ties the handkerchief of Lady Zahra on his forehead. And we know from history that one of the Iranian leaders or kings tried to dig up the grave. When there was a claim that this was Hur's grave, he went to Karbala and he dug up the grave and he tried to take the handkerchief. He saw the grave and it was fresh, the body was fresh, and he tried to take the handkerchief off and close the grave. Blood started to gush out. And the people reported that the blood was continuously flowing, that he had to return the handkerchief. And so he placed the handkerchief back and he built the mausoleum there. And inshallah, Allah gives us all an opportunity to go to these places to revive our spirits and to try and understand the loyalty that comes and the satisfaction that comes with following the truth. And the rewards are multiple, whether it's in this world or in the akhirah, you know. We get a status, I mean, Hur is remembered today.
And his Bible, how
so, you know, we have to acknowledge that we have so many opportunities to change. We just have to be able to take it in our hands and act on it, inshallah.
Yeah. And what you said about we all find ourselves in that state, you know, in that position at one time or another when we're dithering and we get lost along the way, and that we recognise where the truth is, but do we have what it takes,
courage,
the courage that it takes for us to grasp it when it's within reach. And he displayed that it can be done, and you have to overcome yourself and overcome your ego and humble yourself, and that's exactly what he did. And he was taken in, you know, with open arms by Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And if you think this is Imam Hussein, imagine the Lord of Imam Hussein, how magnanimous Allah is, and the door of mercy is always open to us at every point. So subhanAllah, that is another important lesson. One of the other things I wanted to talk about was the importance of relationships and spouse selection, for example, because when we look at the lineage as well and the importance of who you marry, this came into Karbala, or we see a couple of examples of this, one of which is when Imam Hussein al-Islam, he addresses the enemy and he says, the reason why you're doing this to me is because of your upbringing and what you've learnt from your forefathers, the blood of your forefathers and everything that you've taken from them. So there's an importance there for you to have, you know, to marry pure people with, you know, of a certain belief or certain values and principles, and to be brought up in the correct way. And then we'll see another example of this when, of course, Imam Ali Islam marries the mother of Abu al-Fadl Abbas alayhi salam as well, and he looks for a woman of a certain lineage so that she can bear him a warrior child. So we see the importance of spouse selection too.
I heard from a very wise lady on one of the programs I was watching. She said, in Islam, I think it's important to mention that we marry for principles, not personality. So she said, so that's an important thing.
That's revolutionary.
Yeah, amazing. I'm afraid I can't remember her name correctly, so I'm not going to try and pronounce it. But she was on one of the programs, and when she said this, it sort of struck home, because this is exactly what all the youngsters are looking for, and we're always looking for how, you know, our personality of the opposition and who's you know, what kind of people they are and everything, rather than the principles that they hold, the principles that they stand for. And again, when we talk about Imam Hussein and we talk about Karbala and Ashura, we always see there's this talk of principles, and the principle for goodness, the principle for Imam Hussein on the day of Ashura stands there crying, and he's weeping, and he says to the people, you're in this position and you're going to go to hell because you're going to kill me. And that hurts me, that makes me weep, that I have to be, you know, that your action in regards to me is actually going to take you on that path.
And that truly has touched you. The first time I heard that as well,
I can't think of any human being
can't imagine
who has borne so many tragedies between Fajr and Asr can actually turn around to his enemy, to not his enemy, let me correct that, not his enemy, the enemy of Islam, the enemy of Allah, turn around to the enemy of Allah and say that it hurts me that you are going to go to hell because you're going to do the greatest of misdeeds by fighting me. And this was not saying to them, oh, you know, I'm great or anything. It wasn't that. It was, I feel pain that you're in that position when I'm constantly admonishing you. Like you said, and the effect is just falling on deaf ears. Because again, if we go back in Ziyarat Ashura, we say, we take away rahmah from those people who ate the raw livers, who ate the raw livers in the battlefield. Let's think back. Whose mother was she? Whose grandmother was she? Whose lineage does that come down to?
Exactly.
And then there's people here who were bloodthirsty, who were money hungry, who had been brought up to believe that Islam was a whole set of rituals and nothing practical, nothing human-like. It was just something. People on the opposition were praying, reciting adhan, and Rasulullah's name is being recited and you're killing Rasulullah's son. The one who is reminding you of Rasulullah, the one whose son looks like Rasulullah, the one whose daughter is telling you, I'm the daughter of Rasulullah's daughter. So it's an irony that the message is staring you in the face.
But you're too blind to see.
And you're too blind to see it. There's locks on your heart because every time guidance has tried to touch your heart, you've turned away. Every time guidance comes to you, you turn away. You push it away. You suppress that feeling of listening to the truth and the right.
Yeah. It shows that these are empty rituals that they're performing, and it's just force of habit.
Yeah,
nothing more.
And these come with a lot of upbringing, like you said, nurture and nourishment, and eating the right, eating food that's halal. Your bellies are filled with haram. This is what he said. Your bellies are filled with haram. What effect will words of admonition have on your hearts when your bellies are filled with haram? So to take special care when whatever we eat, when we eat it, it should be halal. It should be earned halal. It should be free of zakat, khums, and that there should be no haqq of anybody else within it. And it should be earned purely without, all the rest of the laws that we have to take into consideration. And the fact that the family is the closest is the lap where all the foundations are laid. And this is very important because the child grows up believing these things that the parents tell them and is nurtured in this manner to have this personality. And when Hur is dying, then what does Imam Hussein say to him? Truly today you are Hur, you are a free man, just as your mother named you. So it was a pleasure that even the mother would have. I mean, the other story of a mother and son is Wahab, right? Wahab al-Kalbi, who joined the caravan of a Nasrani, a Christian, who joined the caravan. His mother and his newlywed wife joined the caravan of Imam Hussein. And as they join, and as Wahab is killed in the battlefield, his wife goes in to hug his body and to weep, and the enemy strike and she's martyred there as well. And then they sever his head and they throw it towards the mother. And the mother turns around and said, whatever we gave in the name of Hussein, we don't take back. So for mother she urges her son to go. She reminds him of his duty to the Lord, to the truth. And when he sees the truth, she says, there's no turning back. This is what it is. You see the mothers in Karbala. Every one of them on the eve of Ashura is telling the other, no one should go before you. Every one of them is grooming their children and saying, tomorrow you're going to go there and you're going to defend Imam. Tomorrow you're going to make sure that no one takes permission before you do. Tomorrow you're going to make sure that Imam Hussein doesn't get a scratch on his body. You're there to defend him. Whilst you're alive, no one is going to touch Imam Hussein. The young Qasim goes into battle. Aun and Muhammad go into battle. Ali Asghar at that tender age goes into battle. And I say goes into battle because he only goes to ask for a few drops of water. And the enemy are so hard-hearted, so cold-hearted, so stone-hearted that they reply with an arrow. So at the end of the day, every mother you see there prepares her child. And prepares them for that ultimate sacrifice, for the truth. And Qasim at that young age says, I find death
sweeter than honey.
Sweeter than honey. And you know what reminds it just reminds me of something that Imam Ali alayhi salam says. For me, death is closer to me than the child suckling the mother's bosom. This is how close and how I view death. That it's not something that's alien to us. This is something that is, if it's for Allah, then
exactly. And these, again, in answer to Ibn Taymiyyah, these are not people who have love of dunya.
And of course, this doesn't mean, when I say for Allah, in the name of Allah, in the way of Allah, to give your life up, I do not mean at any point suicide bombing. We don't condone it. We don't condone hurting other human beings and bringing them pain and suffering by killing yourself.
Of course not.
There is no indication to that. This life is a gift from Allah. But were it to be the only thing that the last thing that you have to give in the name of Allah, then it's a different thing. We're not talking about an offensive war, we're talking about a defensive war. At every point you see it's a defensive war. There's no one who has struck the first arrow here from Imam Hussein's side. There's no one who has approached the enemy and said, oh, we're going to fight you. In fact, they want to fight early, and Imam Hussein says, go Abbas, go to Umar Asad and ask him for one night's respite, so that I can worship Allah. Again, the reminder, who are you talking about? What power does he want?
Exactly. Spending an entire night in worship of Allah to spend with his beloved.
Yeah. What gifts? He's waiting to go to Jannah. He's waiting to meet his grandfather and his father. He has no other worldly gain. He's waiting to go and have that ultimate sacrifice.
I mean, when we look at the stories in the Holy Quran, we look at the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, who was ready to sacrifice his son Ismail, and we find that story truly amazing, and we go on the rituals of Hajj to remind ourselves. But when we look at what happened in the plains of Karbala and what Imam Hussein alayhi salam did, and he not only sacrificed his entire family, but himself as well. He went that much further.
And the scholars of the Ahlul Bayt reply to the translation, to the tafsir of Dhibh Azim as the great sacrifice, and Allah says we will replace this with a great sacrifice. And Rasulullah is from the progeny of Ibrahim alayhi salam, and the greatest sacrifice that was replaced with was the sacrifice of Hussein and his family on the plains of Karbala.
Yeah, and the promise that was given to Ibrahim alayhi salam as well, that there will be imams from his lineage, but of course it will not go to the unjust. And again, we see that these were the most just of leaders, the most just of people, and the opposition are those who are the most unjust. So this is something for us all to think about. These are all thought-provoking concepts that we need to spend time on, pondering about, because the answers are all there. You know, it's in history, it's in the Holy Quran. We need to take time out to look at them for ourselves and not just listen to the propaganda out there and the misconceptions, the fallacies that are bandied about. It's important for us to think about them for ourselves and to come to conclusions, you know, by considering the facts and not just listening to the misconceptions, unfortunately, which are out there. Okay, unfortunately we've come to the end of today's show, but we will continue our series in the next show. But last week I spoke to you about offering any of your poems, your nohas, anything that you'd like to give to us in the way of sharing your knowledge of Imam Hussein Islam, to either storytelling about whether it's through nohas, as I mentioned, or sketches or anything like this. And we have had a couple of people send in things. So today I'm going to show you some of the drawings that have been sent in, and this one is sent in from Salman Ali. I absolutely love that.
Yeah.
I love Hussein, mashallah. Salman Ali, aged
8 years.
8 years, mashallah. Ya Hussein. Very, very pretty, very beautiful. I love them. So if you've got anything that you'd like to send in to us, then do not hesitate to do so. Our address is livingislam@hidayat.tv. That's livingislam@hidayat.tv. If you are on Facebook, then you can send them via our Facebook group. So just join the group and you can post them there, or you can like our page and inbox them to us on there as well. We've got another little poem to share with you as well. So inshallah, here's the poem. This is how it begins. It's called O Hussein. O Hussein, upon you I send salams. I bear witness you were righteous, prayed and gave the poor their alms. O Hussein, I bear witness you forbade wrong and encouraged right. You were not one seeking to fight, nor was your rise in vain. The Ummah's revival was your only aim. O Hussein, I bear witness, in guidance you were a lamp. Never would you agree to Yazid and his crimes, for you and the people of your camp would instead for truth die 1,000 times. O Hussein, I bear witness, unbearable is your calamity for the heavens and the earth. But to you death is only happiness, and life under tyrants has no worth. O Hussein, I bear witness, you were successful in every test, overcome hunger, loss and fear. Who but you from their son's chest had to lift a spear? O Hussein, I bear witness, when they oppressed, you stayed firm, and when they attacked, you stayed strong. You strived till you reached your term, confident that the right will always overcome the wrong. O Hussein, I bear witness that you loved your prayers, you made your final stand, and with a prostration gave honor to the sand. O Hussein, I bear witness you gave all you had to give. Your sacrifice we will forever cherish, knowing for sure Husseiniyyat will always live, and Yazidiyat is bound to perish. MashaAllah, that's truly beautiful, and I think that's incorporated all the ideas that we spoke about today and very beautifully and concisely put them into a poem. So that's exactly the kind of thing we're looking for. The person who wrote that poem would prefer to stay anonymous, but Jazakallah khair for that, and please keep them coming. We absolutely love reading them, and I'm sure everybody who will read that will benefit. I love the way that poetry and authors seem to tell the stories so succinctly and really touch the heart. And you know, we could talk for hours, but sometimes it's just a few words that can sum up everything. So inshallah, keep them coming, and Jazakallah khair for watching, and see you next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.